I think it's important to understand some of the mechanism, right? So, because I think for me, that's really motivating. When I know that I'm doing a cardiovascular workout that's improving my VO2 max, reducing my heart rate recovery, thereby extending my longevity, I'm really motivated by that. Like I know that, hey, this 4x4 protocol sucks, but I know that my heart is getting healthier. I'm getting more resilient. I'm increasing my immunity. I'm reducing inflammation, right? Which exercise is so great for.
And you're also helping your resistance training days. Like, make no mistake.
Question. Yes.
You are going to be better at leg day when you have better cardiorespiratory fitness.
There's no question about that, right? Like I am going to be 100% stronger in the gym when I have that good VO2 max or, I've improved my cardiorespiratory fitness.
Hello, my friends. Welcome back to another episode of Better with Dr. Stephanie. It's me, your host, Dr. Stephanie Estima. And today I have part 2 with Kristen Homes. You may recall Kristen, she came on the show last year. She was talking all about circadian biology and how we can optimize our sleep. And I said to her on that show, either during the show or after we stopped recording, I didn't even get to talk to you about exercise. I didn't even get to talk to you about meal timing. Like, can you come back for part 2? And that's what today is. So if you are not familiar with Kristen, she is a psychophysiologist and her research is focused on testing and experimentation across sleep, circadian rhythms, recovery, and training behaviors to identify and communicate their impact on physiological and psychological resilience. A little bit of her flex or her credentials. She has an MIT Sloan Artificial Intelligence Certificate, an MA in Psychology and Sports Performance, a BA in Political Science of the University of Iowa, and she's a PhD candidate there, and a University of Queensland at the University of Queensland. And she serves as the scientific advisor to Levels Health, a scientific advisor to Arena Labs, an advisor to Evolve Leadership, which is a performance ambassador to the Liminal Collective, and sits on the Tactical Leadership Board for Sports Innovation Lab. So she is incredibly credentialed, incredibly qualified. And today we are talking all about muscle science. So we are talking about the aspects of recovery. We're talking about the ideal cardiovascular regimen to build up both the top end and the bottom end of your cardiorespiratory fitness. So we talk about VO2 max, we talk about 4x4s, we talk about zone 2 training. And then we also get into strength training, and we differentiate, and Kristen differentiates between raw strength and explosive strength, and what we might be focusing on, how we can think about incorporating these into our everyday life. We talk about exercise snacks. We talk about carb timing, protein timing, all the things that you would want to hear from an exercise physiologist of the caliber that Kristen is. We had a great conversation that's going to be applicable to any woman. We really did bias towards women in terms of the conversation around recovery and exercise prescriptions. So any woman that is looking to build muscle, any woman that is looking to build her endurance and her heart health and to just get better and healthier overall, this is going to be incredibly relevant for you. So without further delay, please enjoy my conversation with Kristen Homes. All right, Kristen, my dear friend, welcome back to the Better Show.
Thank you so much for having me. So happy to be back to talk with you.
Oh, I'm so happy you're here too. Last time you were on the show, we were talking about circadian rhythms, how to optimize it, and here we are for part two, and we're gonna jump right in. So let's start with exercise. I would love, maybe we'll start generally in terms of how exercise affects the circadian clock. I mean, generally, in the evening, we're sleeping, we're less active than we are during the day, but how can we think about exercise timing as a way to positively affect our circadian rhythm? And we'll kind of dive into intensity and volume and frequency and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, our body is going to be optimally mobilized for energy during the daylight hours, right? And that's when our body is most primed to be active. So, and that's when our kind of clocks expect us to be active, right? So we want to try to create as much, as we talked about in the last podcast, as much synergy with the light-dark cycle as possible. So if we're looking, a lot of the research that's been done specifically around circadian rhythms, performance, and health, it seems that, if you're looking for cardiovascular improvements, really anytime during the day, while it's light out, you're going to see improvements. But it seems that strength training, your body is most primed to benefit from those adaptations kind of later in the afternoon. So around that kind of 3 to 4, o'clock time frame. So that's kind of what we, just to distill all the literature that's out there and kind of what we've seen from some of the reviews, that seems to be the skinny on circadian rhythms and adaptations to various types of exercise. I think the other maybe important thing to point out is that, the question I get asked a ton is, it's later at night, the sun has gone down. I haven't had a chance to exercise, can I exercise? And I think the answer is absolutely yes. For some people who are more sensitive to light, it might impair the melatonin production, right? So generally speaking, if we're working out at night, we're going to be exposed to a lot of bright lights in a gym, for example, which is going to make us feel more alert. So
You're
those
look
are
at your phone for your playlist and the blue light stuff.
You're just, so that I think when we talk about when people are finding that it's tough to fall asleep or stay asleep, it might be, it's maybe not always the exercise. It's more of just the exposure to light. So if you can safely work out and minimize that, will have less of an impact on that melatonin release, which is that sleepy hormone that, helps us get into that nice restful sleep that's so important for many reasons other than just sleep and feeling sleepy. But, so we want to try to protect that melatonin production as much as possible. So so if we can sequence our workouts during the daylight hours, that's optimal. But exercise is so important that we don't want to not exercise, but we just need to be mindful that it might impact our sleep.
Yeah. And, for the 3 to 4 p.m., I'm assuming that's because core body temperature sort of at the ideal.
Starting to peak. Yeah.
And then the joints have well lubricated through micro movements through the day. You've had a couple meals maybe at that point.
That's exactly right. Yeah. You're going to have, energy in the muscles, ready that you can utilize. And so that all of those factors contribute to, to it being a really great time for adaptation to take place.
And I think I just want all the moms that are like, oh no, that's school pickup.
Yeah.
It's like, if you can't do it at 3,
no,
you just get it in when you can get it in, right? But that's the ideal optimal time, just based on some of those factors that we just listed. I work out at 6 a.m, right?
Yeah.
That's not ideal, but it's the time that I have.
Yep.
And, that's what I do. So.
Yeah. And I think just, sitting down on a Sunday, just kind of carving out 15 minutes for yourself where you can plan your week, recognizing, hey, my kid's got a softball game at 6. I'm going to have to, maybe get up a little bit earlier and work out. Like, I think scheduling your workout is just so critical. And some days I don't have a block of time, and I'll just literally after a meeting, I'll get my kettlebell and I'll do 10, 20 kettlebell swings, and then I'll go back onto Zoom. And then when I get done, I'll do 20 more kettlebells. But by the end of the day, I've done 120 kettlebell swings, right? And, maybe I'll do a kettlebell swing with a goblet squat. Like, I'm just like, and the only way for me to kind of make that possible is really sitting down on Sunday and figuring out, okay, this is what my week looks like. This is my time for exercise, in the same way that I carve out time for sleep. And try to make that as consistent, as possible. I think scheduling exercise is so critical. And I think, to your point, it doesn't have to be perfect. You just need to get it in. And that is the most important thing, is that you're getting it in, as often as possible.
And I've seen your Instagram. Sometimes I think maybe you're at a track meet, maybe your child is somewhere, and you're like in the parking lot with
literally
with your bands and your kettlebell, like the girl, the trunk is open and you're kind of doing your stuff. And I'm like, that's amazing, because there's so many times when I feel like an Uber driver for my kids. I'm just taking them to tournaments and literally. But you can get in. I remember there was one, and the weather was nicer. My boys were playing outside, and I was like, I wonder how many lunges I can do for this hour game. Yeah. And I just, by the end of, I had racked up, I think it was like 800 lunges, and I was like, that's my workout today.
Yeah. And sometimes, I'm able to get in my long run, and then I can, chit chat with the parents and be kind of, but sometimes I can. And I just have let go of feeling self-conscious. I've just let go of all of that, and I think you don't have to watch your kids warm up, right? Like, you're not a bad parent. Like, you got to take some of these moments for yourself, and you can still be present and watch the game while you're doing lunges, right? Or doing Russian twists, or, whatever it might be, doing step ups on, a bench that's in the outfield that no one's on. Like, it's just, it's so important that you just find a way. And, and I've had to be like a lot of folks who are listening, I've just had to be super creative and, find a little area where I can do it. And you just can't be self-conscious. You just need to let that go and find a way to get it in.
Great. I love that. Let's talk a little bit about intensity and volume of training and how that might impact recovery. And I'll
Yeah.
pre-frame this by saying that I know that there's a lot of people online. They'll say, oh, if you want to grow your glutes, you have to train your legs like 3 times a week or sometimes 4 times a week. And for me, leg training, I mean, maybe this is just the N of one, but the stimulus to recovery, let's say, is so high. Like after leg day, I can't do anything. And maximally I can train 2 times a week. I train right now. My current split is Wednesdays and Saturdays. Any more than that, and I have brain fog.
Wow.
I'm way too sore. It's crazy for me. And maybe that's the intensity and the volume of it could be the programmatics, it could be the programming as well. But I'd love for you to speak to, maybe the intensity and volume of exercise, particularly with weight training. So, you're getting it in whenever you can get it in, but the intensity and the volume and the need for recovery afterwards. Like, how do we think about intensity of the exercise and then how that relates to recovery? And then maybe my follow-up question is, how do we determine how many times per week, let's say it's legs, how many times per week we can train? Because for me, when I train shoulders, I'm not that tired afterwards. Like I've worked, my
You're
arms are a little
habituated.
sore.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm okay. But legs, I go and I sit on the couch. Like I'm tired after legs.
Yeah. I think what's tough is that it's so individual, right? Like it just depends on your muscle memory. It depends on just what you've been doing, right? Like how new you might be to an exercise, like how new you are to the stimulus. So for shoulders, for example, you might be able to do, you can go, pretty heavy with low rep, quite a few sets and not feel, to your point, not feel sore at all, right? But, legs are just crushing to you, right? But for me, maybe the opposite is true. So I like to think of it more of like, maybe I can back up and I have kind of a philosophy around training and it's called Batwoman fitness, right? And so I think we can get into specific, volume and intensity, 1 rep max, like how do you actually kind of develop a program? But I think really it's about exposing in my opinion, right? Exposing yourself, the ideal exercise protocol is exposing yourself to specific physiological triggers. There are cardiovascular parameters, there are strength parameters, and there are recovery parameters, right? And depending on what you do and how habituated you are to a certain cardiovascular parameter or a strength parameter, it's going to determine how much recovery you need, right? And this is very individual. And this is where you just have to, you can use some technology to kind of objectively see how you're recovering. And then it's very much just how you feel. And I think in relation to soreness, like I especially women who are just starting out on an exercise program, soreness can be a huge deterrent, right? If you can't even sit down to go to the bathroom, the chances of you showing up tomorrow to train are less, right? So it's really about creating a program that you can stick to, that you can be consistent. You want to be available to train almost every day, right? And that means actually limiting some of that soreness. You do not need to be sore to make gains. And I think that's one of the big myths in exercise is and building strength and muscle endurance, muscle hypertrophy, like, so, getting muscles bigger, right? Both are really important for muscle tissue quality, the quality of your muscle tissue. So we need to be thinking about both and training for both. But I think we don't want to ignore the cardiovascular component, right? Because that's also really important. So as a framework, I'd love for women to start to think, okay, how do I work my heart and how do I work my muscles? And what is a program that I can stick to? And maybe that is a foundation. We can kind of go into what these exercises kind of look like and what physiological system they're actually triggering. And I don't know if that's interesting to your listeners, but I think it's important to understand some of the mechanism, right? So, because I think for me, that's really motivating. When I know that I'm doing a cardiovascular workout that's improving my VO2 max, reducing my heart rate recovery, thereby extending my longevity, I'm really motivated by that. Like I know that, hey, this 4x4 protocol sucks, but I know that I am getting my heart is getting healthier. I'm getting more resilient. I'm increasing my immunity. I'm reducing inflammation, right? Which exercise is so great for.
And you're also helping your resistance training days. Like, make no mistake.
Question. Yes.
You are going to be better at leg day when you have better cardiorespiratory fitness.
There's no question about that, right? Like I am going to be 100% stronger in the gym when when I have that, a good VO2 max, or, I've improved my cardiorespiratory fitness. So yeah. So I think,
so tell me about Batwoman. This is Batwoman. Okay,
Batwoman
let's talk about that.
Yeah. Okay. So cardiovascular parameters. So number one, we need to do a VO2 max kind of, max oxygen utilization day, which is a VO2 max, right? And you want to do this, it's super painful, but once every couple weeks, you want to do a VO2 max training. And some of the ones that I think are maybe the best and the most efficacious. And again, folks are busy. I'm busy. I don't have a lot of time. So I think about, all right, what is the most efficacious, the one that can move the needle the most? And the 4x4 protocol is known to be the best at increasing your VO2 max. And I do this every 10 to 14 days. And this is basically, I run as hard as I can for 3 to 4 minutes, and then I rest for 3 to 4 minutes. And I do that 4 times.
Is this the Norwegian protocol? I forget.
This is the Norwegian protocol, right?
Yeah.
And this is really well known, well established, and we know that. And basically, there's ways to measure VO2 max in a lab, and we can kind of talk about that. But generally speaking, you just want to push yourself as hard as you can. And if you have a way to look at your heart rate, you want to be in that kind of zone for that sustained period of time. So this is 85 to 95% of your heart rate max is kind of where.
And how do we know we're getting better? So we're doing this once every 2 weeks. How do we determine whether we're getting better or not?
Well, you'll start to be able to push yourself a little bit harder. So I love doing it on the track. So I know that I'm trying to get, a couple of laps around the track in that 4-minute time period. So if I know I'm getting less or more, I know I'm getting fitter. So having that distance is super, super helpful. So, and that's a great way to know kind of if you're getting thinner, more efficient at this gas exchange, which is really what we're trying to do.
I like to do it on a bike. That's my preferred because
folks can do it on a bike. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in the lab test, you'll do it either on a bike or a treadmill. So I prefer running. I'm not really a cyclist, or I don't love bikes, so I prefer to run. But yeah, whatever you can get on, that where you can kind of do sustained level is going to do the trick. I think the second, really important cardiovascular parameter is sprint interval training. And if people follow me on Instagram, they know that I talk about this constantly because it's the most effective at targeting the mitochondria, right? And we know that increasing the mitochondrial content and inducing those mitochondrial adaptations is super important, for our energy metabolism, which, just ladders up to all sorts of markers of health and longevity. So sprint interval training, which is basically, going, as hard as you can for about 30 seconds and then resting, trying to get your heart rate back all the way down. So maybe a 2-minute rest after that 30-second effort. And again, you can see if you're getting fitter, if you want to, do like a 150 around a track or a 200, you can kind of see how fast you can run that, on day one. And then, you repeat that, 4, 6, 8 times. And again, you might only be able to do twice the first time. And then as you start to get fitter, you bump that up to 4. So you kind of increase your volume, maintaining that rest. And then you see, hey, do I get a little bit further? And that's how you're kind of getting stronger and fitter. And I think to your point, like your earlier, your strength, as your cardiorespiratory fitness is going to improve your strength is going to improve your sprinting speed, right? So, sprint interval training is really important.
It's also anabolic. I just want to say it's also anabolic.
Yes.
So like cardio, generally like the low intensity steady state is typically catabolic, meaning it breaks things down. But sprinting, plyos, anything where we have like burst activity like this is anabolic, meaning it is promoting growth, which is
right.
To your point, like speed, power, you're going to build the muscles that you want this way as well.
Yeah. And it's just, and you don't have to spend a lot of time doing it, right? Like you can get a really good workout in less than 20 minutes, right? And oftentimes what I'll do is I'll do a sprint interval training and then I'll follow that up, I'll do maybe some weights before or after. So I do a little bit differently. Like I lift almost every single day, and I'm not spending a lot of time. Like I'll do, 20 minutes of lifting, 15 to 20 minutes a day. And I'll usually do something cardiovascular every day. So I really try to, and depending on what I want to focus on, I'll do whatever I want to focus on first. So if I'm really, I think to your point, like if I'm doing a leg day and that's my focus, I'm going to do legs first. And then maybe I do 3 reps of, hard sprints afterwards because my legs are really, kind of activated or primed. For me, that works. But for you, you might have to flip it and do your sprints first, get your legs activated, knowing that like legs really crush you, right? So I don't think it really, from an adaptation perspective, I don't think it really matters. I think it's that, you sequence it a way that makes sense and fits into your schedule. But I think that's also a myth that we can't do both on the same day. I have been doing that for years. My athletes that I trained at Princeton at the collegiate level, we did that for 13 years, and we kept everyone healthy and safe and really, getting incredible adaptations, both musculoskeletal and as well as cardiorespiratory wise.
So let me ask you a question, because you know that this is going to come up. We've talked about like the dreaded, the dreaded interference effect, right? Because we see that the muscle hypertrophy pathway is distinct from the endurance pathway. Are you worried about one interfering with the other? And I'll just say with transparency, whenever I do any type of intervals, whether it's speed intervals on the bike or I'll do plyos, any kind of burst, like I was saying, any kind of burst, it's after the weights, because at least for me with my goals, it's always like, I want to build muscle. I want to build muscle. I want to build muscle. So I always do the muscle stuff first, because I've read, and redirect me here if my comprehension of the literature, or maybe I'm not missing something, but I've read that this interference effect, while they're not going to be catabolizing off of each other, there is, like, if you were to do sprints first and then legs, you're going to have less gas in the tank for whatever comes second. So, you said before, hey, if your priority is legs, do the leg first and then do the sprinting afterwards. What are your thoughts on the interference effect? Like, dislike, disregard? What do you think?
I think for someone who is not training for performance, I don't think it's something we should worry about.
Great.
That's how I interpret
That's so
literature.
Freeing.
I know. I think we get really caught up in some of this, and I just don't think it matters. Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen in my own experience, training athletes who are actually trying to perform, and in myself, I haven't really seen this play out in the way that
it's made out to be.
It's made out to be. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, there's no question that this interference effect obviously exists, right? It's well established in the literature. We know this, but I think for women, I think for your audience who are trying to, get these adaptations and get stronger and fitter, strength wise and cardiovascularly, I don't think this sequencing really matters.
Okay, great. And then, so you were talking about the Norwegians, the 4x4s. You do that every 2 weeks. How often are you doing the sprints? Is that every other day, every day? What does that look like?
Yeah, I'll do it a couple times a week. Yeah.
Okay.
And then I try to do the Tabata, which this is like a lactic tolerance that basically makes you more efficient at reprocessing waste products, transporting oxygen in the blood. And that's more of like a Tabata. So if you're going like, 20 seconds hard, 20 seconds off, and these are just like kind of brutal. But again, you can knock out like, 8, 10 in a row when you start to get fit, and boom, you're done. And then I'll go do shoulders, and I'll do, bicep, tricep, or, I'll do shoulders and back, or, so I'll do like a Tabata set, and then I'll go and lift. And I'll do that, probably once a week.
I think that there's something really important too about doing something very difficult, psychologically very difficult, but physically very difficult, because you just learn what you're made of. Like Tabatas, the 4x4s suck.
Yeah,
they're
hard.
They're so hard, but they're harder psychologically, because then you're done. Like, you're finished after 15, 16, you know what, you're finished.
20 minutes.
And then you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
what was I complaining about? What was that inertia that was in my head trying to talk me out of it? It's like the cold plunge, right? It's like, I'm like, oh my God, it's going to be so cold. And then I feel so good afterwards. I'm like, what was I complaining about again?
I know.
There's something really important about pushing yourself and being uncomfortable. I think that what you're saying is very important, obviously for the cardiorespiratory benefits, like training the top end, training your VO2 max, which is important, but also psychologically, because you're like, I can do hard things.
Yeah. I think that building that resilience mentally, physically, emotionally, it's just you against you, and I think it lets you show up, I think, with more confidence, and I think when you get stronger, when you can lift heavier things and that you're kind of you're protected, I think you just move around in the world like very differently. And, and I think like, it doesn't have to be perfect, like maybe you can't be at your top end, like for the entire 4 minutes, but just going out there and doing it is I think the big project here. And I think we can derive tons of confidence just from getting out there and doing it and showing up. And maybe, some days like I'll be like, all right, I'm just going to do 2, because I just feel like because it's hard, but then I get out there and I'm like, all right, I can do 3. I'm like, okay, just do the 4th one, right? Like, I think it's just a matter.
I'm already here.
I'm already here. I think it's a big piece of this is just getting out there and doing it. But yeah, I think there's enormous confidence to be derived from doing some of these like harder workouts, and you don't need to do them every day. You do it, I think that the VO2 max, every 10 days to 2 weeks. And then doing, a sit, I think is a little less. It's like, all right, super hard, but then I get a full rest. The Tabata is definitely mentally, that's hard, but you're done in like 8 minutes, if you're doing a 20 on 20 off and you're doing that, 6 to 10 times or whatever. And those, I love those. I think they feel really good. And then you go, crush some weights and you're done for the day.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
What about training the bottom end? So you've been talking about VO2 max training, kind of the top end of our. Do you think about zone 2,
the polarized
zone 2
training? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I love the long, slow run I put on a podcast. I will say for my VO2 max, like motivation, this is going to sound so silly, but I'll literally put on Rhonda Patrick and Peter Attia talking about the 4x4 protocol, and that like literally as I'm doing it, and they're talking about all the, the benefits to the brain and the body, and and that literally gets me through it. And it's about the whole sequence of conversation is about the time it takes for me to finish the 4x4 protocol. So I literally have them in my ear as I'm doing the 4x4, and I'm not even kidding. But yeah, zone 2, I love just going out for like a long run, and there's obviously lots of great benefits that are well documented, being in this really slow steady state. So kind of that upper zone 1, zone 2, 65% of your max heart rate. And I do that, I'll do maybe 2.5 hours of that per week, which I know kind of sounds like a lot, but I've been building up to this, for years. But yeah, I'll do about 2.5 hours of zone 2 work per week. And for me, I have bigger patches of time on the weekends. So I'll do kind of some of these longer workouts on the weekend, or, maybe a Friday morning where I'm not having to commute in, or a Monday morning when I'm not having to commute in. I do these longer workouts. And then when I have to commute Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I'll do kind of these shorter workouts, where that don't take me long, but I can get it in and just feel like I've accomplished something that day.
And what about the individual sessions? So you're able to accumulate 2.5 hours over the course of the week.
Yeah.
But are you, going back to Peter, I think that he talks about kind of having a minimum effective dose of, I think,
30.
Starting at the bottom end of like 30 minutes.
That's right.
Maybe working up to 45.
Yeah.
Are you thinking about that in the same way? Do you like to have sort of a minimum of 30 minutes, 45 minutes each for each zone 2 session?
Yeah. So sometimes, just it kind of depends. I'll do as much as like an hour and 10 minutes. And actually, rucking on a trail, I get into zone 2. I know, I love that so much. And just being out in nature, bring your dog, bring your kids. It's just a great way to get some exercise in, get that zone 2 in. And I know a lot of folks are talking about rucking these days, but yeah, I just put some weight on my back and that gets me into that zone 2 really nicely. I almost don't have to think about it. When I'm running, I have to be way more conscious. And I think for folks who don't have a heart rate monitor and are interested in kind of getting into that zone 2, you want to just be able to talk very comfortably. That's the best way to know. And I think on the other end of the spectrum, you want to not be able to talk comfortably, right? That's when you know that you're in kind of that upper heart rate max zone, in that zone 5. But yeah, definitely love the endurance piece. And so I'll really try to go for a minimum of 45 and then, a max of, an hour 10 or so.
You're a girl after my own heart, I have to tell you. I love rucking. I love doing it after dinner with the kid. The kids will take a soccer ball out or their bikes, and then they're kind of playing around. And then me and my husband are walking with I have a 25-pound rucksack or whatever.
Yep.
But I also love an hour and 15. I love a 75-minute long, again, podcast in my ears, or there's this DJ that I love that I'll listen to his, daily mix or whatever. It's it's usually Pitbull and all the salsa stuff, all the stuff that gets me all hyped up, right?
Yeah.
So, but I can go for 75 and I feel it's an hour to hour 15, I guess. And I feel so good after that workout. And I've put that on Instagram. People are like, is that in one session? I'm like, yes. And it feels so good.
I know. And I think people underestimate, you don't have to be crushing your soul to get amazing benefits, and rucking, I think, is it's just a great way to build muscular endurance, right? You're going to get your core, you're going to get your back, your shoulders, your legs, it's just rucking is just awesome. And we actually see, zone 2, when we look at our data on the Whoop platform, we see that zone 2, I almost don't even call it an exercise. It's really a recovery modality because it's so recovery. You say, I feel so good afterwards. It's really recovery promoting. And I think a lot of it is you can just kind of, you can take in your environment in a way that it's, I think, a lot harder to do when you're just crushing your soul in a 4x4, for example. So I think there is something to be said to the zone 2. And I think not worrying about the time as much, just kind of getting out there. But I will say, when you got your kids and they're on their bike, before you know it, you're at an hour, it's, it's just a great way to work it in. I think too, bring it to the softball field or to the track, while your kids, just have it on your back and do squats and, kind of pace in the outfield. There's just, it's just another good way to kind of work it in.
I love that. And you said the warm up. It's so funny because my boys have to be, before their game, they have to be there an hour before to do their warm up. And here's the strategy. And and that's when I work, and I'll watch the game, right? But then the hour before is when I'm working out while they're doing whatever. They're not on the pitch somewhere. They're off somewhere. They're doing.
Exactly. And I think that is just a magical time to get in a workout. Just bring a change, just bring another sports bra and change your underwear, but don't worry about getting sweaty. Yeah, I think that's, it's freeing too. When you're like, oh, I have this time, my kid is being supervised and they're doing something fun, and I can also get mine in too.
Let me ask you the dreaded question that I'm always, not dreaded, but I'm asked this so often. Not that I dread it, I'm happy to answer it. But what are your thoughts on the perennial question, fasted cardio or fed cardio? What are your thoughts? What are your personal preferences? What's your compilation or your, assimilation of the available literature? And how do you like to apply it?
I think that for women who are naturally cycling and have a period, I think, we know that when you're in the luteal phase, the couple weeks prior to menses, we know that your system is going to be a bit more stressed, right? It's just a very metabolically expensive time. And so layering extra stress, right, which fasting or doing exercise in a fasted state is going to put extra stress on your system. So I think that the costs absolutely outweigh the benefits during that phase. For me personally, if I am going to do an extended fast, so generally I practice time restricted eating. So I basically consolidate my calories which doesn't have a caloric restriction component, but has a time restriction, right? So it's not about restricting calories. It's really just consolidating your feeding window to the daylight hours, right? So I try to eat all my calories when the sun is up. And I actually bias it earlier in the day when I'm most primed to metabolize my food. So I think we miss out when folks are fasting well into the afternoon. They're missing a really important window of time when we're actually primed to metabolize and use those nutrients, right? So I think, my take is that I don't know that these really long, big extended fasts are necessary for kind of health and longevity. But I do think, thinking about it from a circadian timing perspective, I think that is where you stand to gain the most ground. And I think it's important to have energy when you're working out, right? And if you don't have, you know, if you're not eating calories, like and you're depleted, right? You're going to, be in a position where you're just not gonna have as much energy to work out. So I think for me personally, like I've gotten totally away from, a fasted strength workout or a fasted cardio workout. And I don't think that that's necessary to kind of create the metabolic flexibility that everything thinks that you need to do, and the only way to do that is through fasted training. That's not how I interpret
and the literature. The literature is pretty clear in terms of there's no difference in terms of body composition outcomes. Like whether you do anything fasted or anything fed, but where I think fed cardio or fed anything, fed resistance training, fed Tabata, whatever, where we do see it as a clear winner is its effect on performance, which is kind of what we want. If you are going into a psychologically and physically demanding 4x4, or you're doing leg day or back day or whatever it is that you're doing, at least for me, I can tell you that there is a measurable difference in my output, my endurance, my nervous system. I just have more to give to the workout because I fed myself. So that's sort of how I look at it. And then I often will have people say, well, I work out early in the morning, and my response is, so do I. I typically start eating at about 6. I'm at the gym at about 6:30 and I do my workout, do my thing. And then I come home and then I eat again. So I will stop, because when we wake up in the morning, and I'd love for you to speak to this as well, when we think about at least our muscles, they're a reservoir of amino acids, and you are absolutely in a catabolic state. Like your muscles are supplying the body with the required amino acids for whatever, all the, there's so many proteins all the time for every single cell. So we just want to stop that catabolism by giving our body some protein. So that's sort of where I stand. So I typically will I like protein. I like some whey protein, like a scoop or two, depending on leg day is 2 scoops, shoulder day is 1 scoop. And then, and then some oatmeal. And then that's sort of like my if you will, if there's a pre-workout, that's my pre-workout. And then I'll eat afterwards, right? Because also we know during even some of the, the Batwoman fitness, which I don't think we finished the protocol yet, but
we're getting there. Yeah. We're going to go through the strength next. Yeah.
Yeah. So the 4x4, the sprint intervals, the Tabata, you're depleting the muscles, right? You're using the glycogen, the phosphocreatine system is being active. All these things are being kind of depleted. So you need something, at least in my opinion, after the workout as well, to drive up. And then we'll talk about carb timing in a moment, but to drive insulin and growth. And like, that's what we want after a workout. We want the reparative process to start with food. So that's sort of where I sit with it. It's like, I know most people work out early in the morning. So do I. You can also have an intra work, like you can put some EAAs, let's say, in your drink, like some essential amino acids, let's say, in your drink. Like that's sort of how I look at timing in the peri-exercise area, at least.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's all about energy, right? And I think that's at a fundamental level, that is what you're evaluating. Do I have the energy to train in the way that I desire it? And am I getting the effects that I want? And I think, I'm so happy that, we're getting clear on what is required in order to get the adaptations that we're after, right? And I think, training fueled is really important. And I think there's nothing worse than low energy availability, right? Which we know leads to a loss of period and, can lead to all sorts of other, detrimental health outcomes, right? So I think we don't want to be in a chronically depleted state. That just doesn't, obviously, it intuitively doesn't make sense, right? So I think for women who are trying to understand what the balance is, just pay attention to your energy levels and to the kind of keep a journal, and you can say, did I eat? Did I not eat? When did I eat? What did I eat? When did I have the most energy? When did I feel really good? And I think you'll end up coming, I think, to a conclusion around what works for you. Some people need a banana with honey on it, and maybe that's all they want to eat, and that's enough, and they feel like they can really crush their sprint workout. But you know what? When they're lifting, they need a little bolus of protein with that, and I think it's experimenting with what you need. And to your point, like, for shoulder day, you need a little less. For leg day, you need a little bit more. And, you've arrived at these conclusions because you obviously know a lot about what's happening with the body, but you're also just paying attention to how you're responding and how you're adapting to your training. And that's where, I think all the science is amazing, but I think women just need to start to pay attention to their body, right? And pay attention to, what they're fueling their body with, and when they're fueling their body, and just how they feel. And I think asking, increasing that awareness, I think, is going to allow folks to arrive at a plan and I think a nutrition protocol that's best for them.
Yeah. And I like what you said before. You mentioned, it was just sort of in passing, you said, oh, on the weekends, I just have a little bit more time. For the someone who's working out, she's part of the 4 a.m. or the 5 a.m. club, and eating anything more than a banana feels like a brick in her stomach, then just play on the weekends. Maybe just shift it back a little bit. If you're really constrained during the week in terms of, I got to be at work at such and such a time. And, maybe the weekend provides an opportunity to play with substrate. Like, so we can play a little bit with feeding, and then you can monitor, to your point, with the journaling and how you felt that, what your lifting was like and your recovery, what it felt like to eat prior or maybe immediately afterwards, if you're not doing that, versus during the week where maybe you're just having some coffee with some, the other thing I'll often tell people is like, just put some core power. I know this is, I'm not affiliated with this company at all, but they are filled in my fridge. So core power is just like chocolate. I know they have other flavors, but why would you ever do anything other than chocolate? So chocolate, like 26 grams or 42 grams of protein just in your coffee in the morning. And you can, maybe not the whole bottle, you put like maybe half of it or whatever, but you have a nice bolus of protein there with with a little, little catecholamine, you're getting like the cortisol and everything kind of revved up for your workout, which is, great predictor of success too, is like how much cortisol can you rev? Like, how can you rev the nervous system? How's that going to impact your performance? Right.
Yep. Yeah. Without a doubt. Yeah. I think there's so many like easy like ways to sneak it in. And but I think the experimentation is really important. Do you like it in a liquid form versus, like if you're having, a solid, that might just feel not as good on your stomach. So I think experimenting with the timing is really key. And I think, the other point you made is just after your workout, making sure you're getting protein. We know that's well established, right? Like, we want to make sure that we're replacing and getting, at least, I think, 30 grams of protein after a workout session.
Yeah. What's your thoughts on carbohydrate timing? So I know you and I have attended lectures where scientists have said, hey, 25 grams for the whole day. And you and I sort of looked at each other like, the whole day?
Yeah.
Well, at least I thought that. I was like, the whole day?
I know.
25 grams?
Yeah.
So what do you think about carb timing?
Okay. So,
and how much?
So timing, again, like, I'm a kind of before 3 p.m., you want to try to get, as much as your food in as you can. Like, you get less good at metabolizing your food as the day progresses. So I think for me, I'm very much an intuitive kind of eater, and I really try to listen to my body. And I think for the most part, when I listen to my body and I'm sleeping well, I'm exercising well, I'm managing my emotional health in a way that's good, like I generally reach for the right things. When all of those things aren't in place, that's when I need to step back and be like, all right, what's going on here? I need to be way more mindful, because the default mechanisms are gonna, push me to, reach for the stuff that I know isn't optimal for me, right? So I think number one, we just need to be more aware, I think, of how we're feeling and how that's impacting our food choices just generally. And I think that's often like a skill because we have availability of food 24/7, right? We've got fridges, right? We're not like going out and killing our food and then putting it on the fire. And right, like we have so much accessibility. We have, I think, blunted a lot of the cues around our instincts, right? Like, and I think for women in particular, we, because of just our evolutionary roots, like we are looking to try to eat as much food as we can all the time, right? So we can create some safety for, we don't know when the next calorie is going to come, right? When we were on the savannah. So we had to just eat as much as we could when we got it. So now obviously that's not the case, right? So we have to fight some of those instincts. So I think carbohydrate in general, I think can be, I don't want to say this, it can be a little dangerous, right? Because it's not filling, right? So I think you want to eat your protein and vegetables first, try to satiate with that, and then, fill in with, a carbohydrate, like a sweet potato or something. But I think we want to obviously avoid, the processed kind of, white carbohydrates as much as possible. Those are just not gonna, they're just not as productive of a fuel source as, the other types of carbohydrates. So I think in terms of timing, protein, fats, vegetables, and then carbohydrate. I don't think that carbohydrate at every meal is necessary, right? And I would say, there's a lot of individual variability, but I think keeping potentially below 100 grams, this seems right to me. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think it's.
I like depends. What Casey means. Casey means has also said no naked carbs. So like have your carbs,
I love that.
Make sure no naked carbs. Like have them, like you said, with the protein. Like do the protein first, then the veg, then the fat, and then you can have the rice, the potatoes, the whatever afterwards. And I think that's a nice way to think about it.
Yep, you're going to reduce your glucose, response when you're having carbohydrates last as opposed to first. Right. So there's some things happening mechanistically that are really protective when we're eating in that order.
Yeah, I really like that. And I like the idea also of front loading the carbs earlier in the day. Like I'm very happy, I have a piece of sourdough bread every single day for breakfast, but I wouldn't have that meal. So I have like my eggs, I'll have feta cheese is what I had this morning. Feta cheese on my sourdough toast with my egg whites and one yolk that I like to like smash so all the, the yolk comes out all over everything.
My daughter loves that too. The runny.
Yeah, exactly. And then a side of berries, like maybe probably a cup. It's like a ramekin. I feel like blackberries or whatever. But I wouldn't have that meal in the evening.
Right.
I wouldn't have that meal in the evening.
And that doesn't feel right to you though, right? Like your body is I think, and this is where I think we need to kind of get to a place where we are training our body to anticipate that kind of meal when we're most primed to metabolize that kind of meal, and it's like you've kind of developed this, it's like now, like that's when you crave it. That's when it feels right. And sure enough, like that's actually the healthiest time to be eating that kind of meal. Right. And I think we can argue that it's not going to hurt you obviously to have that meal at night. I mean, it's a beautifully composed meal with so much like benefits, but when we're talking about really working with the clocks in our body and getting this timing right, we want to try to move, a bulk of our nutrient dense, calorically rich foods like in earlier part of the day.
Yeah. And I'm going to call myself out here as well. Last night I had no vegetables prepped. So my dinner was just like some sauteed ground chicken and I just put some cheese on it. And I'm like, well, that's all that's what I got. But that's like just protein and fat. Right?
100%.
So not that I always have that. Usually I have some mushrooms or something on the side, but that feels good to me. I like to have more protein and fat, at the end of the day, less carbs. I find that helps with my sleep. Although I know that some people do like to have carbohydrates, particularly people who are like chronically stressed. They like to have a little bit of like a dose of maybe some honey with tea or something in the evening. That seems to help sometimes with sleep as well.
Yeah. I mean, honey there's like I just read a study where they looked at honey as part of, honey was in the pre-bed sleep cocktail. Yeah. So your brain taps your liver glycogen before hitting your muscle glycogen. So a little extra honey before you go to bed actually helps your slow wave sleep, in particular the front end of the night. So that all kind of makes sense. So I think if people need to eat before bed, I always recommend, something high in casein protein, like a cottage cheese or a yogurt, or, with, a honey drizzled, some walnuts, a little bit of fat, and berries, which is, walnuts are both precursors. They're high in serotonin, so precursors to melatonin. So that would be kind of like the recommended. And that was interesting with the honey, that can kind of help with the slow wave sleep, which seems counterintuitive because you're like sugar, but the honey actually taps the liver glycogen, which is kind of a cool
Which is
finding.
nice too, because overnight, as your cortisol starts to rise a little bit, if you are someone who's chronically stressed, you're going to probably wake up. Like the honey is going to maybe help keep you asleep.
Potentially. Yeah. I thought that was interesting. So I'm going to start to experiment a little bit with that. But yeah, you bring up a really good point about, I know that's like one of the, I think we talked about it maybe in the last podcast, but that wake up at 2 a.m. I think exercise can help that, because when you're exercising, you're reducing actually inflammation, and those systems that modulate our stress are working more effectively. So, exercise actually, it feels stressful in the moment, but it's actually reducing stress long term and can actually help you sleep better and stay asleep. So another, feather in the cap for exercise.
Love that. I know there's just, I don't think we're ever going to find any remedy, any drug, anything that is going to be as potent in terms of promoting salutogenic type of health promotion than exercise. It is just the panacea of good. Of course, anything can be taken to an extreme. You can over-exercise, but I think for the majority of the population, that's not the case. Where it's very, very hard to reach. It's hard to over-exercise. I mean, maybe if you're doing, you're not allowing for some of the recovery, which we're going to, some of the recovery mechanisms that we've been talking about to take place. But I think for the most part, it's, I've read studies that have shown that exercise is as effective, and, you can argue more effective than SSRIs on depressive episodes in individuals. And I would say more effective because you don't have the side effects of the drug, right? You're not now dealing with the addictive potential and the downregulation of serotonin, all the things that happen when you go on some type of pharmacological intervention, in this case, an SSRI. So I think that there's a lot with exercise. And I just, in rounding out the Batwoman fitness protocol, I realized that we haven't done that. So we did the cardio piece.
Let's talk
talk about the strength.
Just on your point in terms of brain health, like I just to underscore that, because I think what's happening, is we're enhancing growth factor expression and neuroplasticity, which, is particularly kind of that high intensity stuff, right? And a lot of folks avoid that, and I think we could talk about this too. Some people actually overdo the high intensity interval training, right? And that's when actually that can lead to, it can be counterproductive, right? At some point where it's like it's too much inflammation, right? That's brought on by the high intensity training. But I think for the most part, you're right. I don't think there's probably, we probably can't do too much, but I think that high intensity really does contribute to improving mood and cognition, right? Which is going to have massive effects on our mental health. So yeah, I mean, there isn't a system in the body that exercise doesn't help and doesn't. And so, yeah, I think it's absolutely vital. Yeah. To make sure that, I think too, I think just in principle, when we're talking about like our internal environment, right? When you look at folks who are active versus inactive, the folks who are inactive have a volatile internal environment, right? And that's chronically inflamed. And inflammation, as we know, I mean, that's the primary mechanism of disease, right? So, we want to exercise it's just such a massive component to buffer that inflammation. And even if other aspects of I just got done doing grand rounds at Colorado University of Colorado medical system. And, one of the things I was talking about, these folks have really irregular sleep wake time. There's so many things that they can't do just because of their job. But if they can exercise, it can actually buffer some of the, negative effects of some of these other lifestyle, factors.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. And we're,
Yeah.
there's a lot more research we need to do here, but exercise really does seem to be protective when we can't stabilize our sleep wake time, or we're, not getting we're having short sleep. Exercise seems to be a really important countermeasure to that. So I'm
Oh,
just
that's so
throwing.
good for like shift workers, new
Exactly. New
moms.
moms,
Oh,
I know,
God.
because it's like we don't, and I know like when you're a new mom, obviously we've both been there and understand that you just don't feel like you have the energy, but, going out for like a brisk walk and, just working in like 15 seconds of, just a high intensity sprint, as you're going for a walk, just even if it's in the driveway and you're spending 4 minutes, like it just adds up, and I think like, I think really where I want women to go is like, I just need to do a little bit every day, and I need to just work it in whenever I can, and just don't, in taking that pressure off of like it having to be perfect and you have to have the perfect workout outfit in the gym. Like, forget that, just show up.
Totally. Well, this exercise snacking concept that you're
Mm.
talking about, this like accumulated versus continuous exercise, we know it from the literature as well, like just to kind of underscore and double click and highlight what you're saying, is that when you can do these little snacks, these little exercise bits throughout the day, you have the same outcomes, if
Yes.
not arguably better outcomes than someone who's gone to the gym for an hour and then sat down for the rest of the day, versus if you took the hour at the gym and you broke it up into 10 6-minute little, you're going to
Question.
have the
Yeah.
same, body composition changes, lipid profile changes, metabolic, all the things are better. They're at least equivalent, and in some cases they're better.
Yeah.
So wherever, like that kind of get it in whenever you can is incredibly important, and may be better than the cute gym outfit, the hour at the gym, and all the
I know.
things, right?
I mean,
Yeah.
I think, there are some studies out there that have shown, that exercise snack is, to your point, is just as effective as a consolidated 1 hour in the gym. So yeah. So I think, which is again, really freeing, like to have this knowledge. And I think you make a really important about inactive time, right? Like we don't want to be sitting, here we are, we're both sitting, but we're going to get up after this and we're going to move a whole lot. But,
Yes.
every, hour, 90 minutes, you want to get up and do something, relatively vigorous. You want to break up your sedentary time. It's so important. And if you can think just a little bit more strategically about it, like you can really get the most out of those, little, exercise or movement snacks, throughout the day. And they can accumulate to, I think, pretty massive benefits. All right. We're going to keep going.
Love it.
Muscle parameters, raw strength. Okay.
Yeah, let's
All right.
do it.
So I think about,
so we have the cardio piece.
Yep.
And now I'd love the resistance piece.
All right, great. So raw strength and kind of explosive functional strength. So raw strength, just is more like controlled heavy weight, and you're trying to kind of have like really good form. And I will say, for some women, if you have the means and you have the time, it is so worth, I think, the time and the money to get a trainer for a couple months. Build your efficacy in the gym and learn how to interact with dumbbells, with kettlebells, with machines. So when you're traveling and all they have is machines, you know how to work those. And then I think once you have the basics of how, what your 1 rep max is, you understand how to progress your weights, as you get stronger, you have the form, you have the core movements, like, a bench press and a deadlift and a squat and a shoulder press and a lat row, you have all kind of these basics. Then, just in your home, get a couple sets of dumbbells, have like a 15-pound, a 20-pound, an 8, whatever it is for your level, a couple kettlebells, and you're always in a situation where you can work out no matter what. You want to limit the excuses. Like that's the key. But in order to limit excuses, you have to build your efficacy first. You have to get comfortable in the gym, or just get comfortable with weights in general. And then it's also too, like, you can just be creative. Like if you're out in a field with your kid, like, grab a rock, pick it up and just walk with it, as they're kicking the soccer ball, like you're walking with a rock, or, again, like just being creative. But I think this notion that, women don't need to be strong, we don't need to be lifting weights is obviously crazy. And I think we're well beyond that. It's so great to see, I think, the industry really exploding and just all of the commentary around, women lifting heavy shit. Like, I love it so much. It's great. But I think the lack of efficacy, I think, is real in this area. Like, we need to build our confidence level in the gym. So I think from my standpoint, I think we kind of started the conversation with intensity. What does the intensity look like? What are the, number of repetitions, like sets, like frequency, like how many times should I be doing this? I think if you like really think about like just muscle groups, and basically over the course of the week, you want to work each muscle group. And, so you want to work your feet, up to your neck. And, you just start with your calves, just simple calf raises. And then once you gain efficacy, add some weight to your hands and you just do your calf raises, and then you do your quadriceps and your hamstrings. And if you have access to, a gym where they have machines, you can do the quad extensions, you can do the hamstring curls, or you can do this, just even these bigger complex movements, just like a squat where you're getting, glutes and hamstrings and quadriceps at the same time. And then you kind of get to your core. So you want to be able to get, your abdominals, lower and middle and upper, and your back. And there's lots of ways to get at this. You can do lat rows and, for your back, reverse fly. There's lots of different options for the back. Good mornings is one of my favorites to get, that one kind of gets almost your whole back, as well as your abdominals is also.
And your hammies.
And your hammies. Oh yeah, your hammies and your upper glute. Yeah. So I think it's kind of getting, I think we could talk for hours again, in terms of all the different exercises. But, in principle, if you're trying to, get stronger and improve your muscle endurance, you want to go slightly less heavy, but more repetitions. Okay. And generally speaking, you're looking, at 4 to 5 sets. So basically, you want to be, 60, 70% of your 1 rep max, right? And you want to do that for 4 to 5 sets. If you're trying to, get more definition, so kind of grow the muscles, which is also, it's great for the aesthetics, but it's also really important for muscle tissue quality, the quality of your muscle tissue. You're looking for lower reps and more weight. So you want to go heavier, and you want to really think about, all right, I'm almost pretty much to failure is when you want to stop. So if endurance, you're looking, you want to stop short, probably 2 to 3 reps of failure. So that's kind of really broadly how to think about, developing raw strength, which I think if you can do nothing else, this is probably the most important, I would say. Would you agree with that? The raw strength?
I could not agree with you more. Yeah. If I could give you an emoji, I would.
Yeah.
Yes. I think it's so important. And I've been just taking notes as you've been talking, controlling the weight. So to your point around, we've kind of gone from cardio bunnies to muscle mommies now, right?
Yeah.
It's like lift heavy shit. And it's like, there's so many women that don't actually have the integrity to do that well.
Exactly. The form is really important. Yeah.
Form is so much. So leave your ego at the door, strip some weight off the bar, off the machine, whatever it is, get good like your form has to be dialed in.
Yeah. Time under tension it's everything, right? Like that's like the biggest principle, right? Like
that's where your muscles grow.
Exactly.
Is when you're most uncomfortable
and controlled. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also like, and I wrote an article for Mind Body Green. I've also written about this before. I really like, for women who are just starting, they're like, okay, I know this protein story. I know this weightlifting story. I got to get in the gym. I also really like the time under tension. I love I like to manipulate the tempo. So I actually like to slow down the eccentric. So when the muscle is elongating, and then maybe there's a pause when the muscle is the longest. So a squat would be bottom of the squat, take a second, And then we're going to talk about explosive strength in a moment. But then the concentric is like you get up as fast as you can. Like you get up and you burst and you come out of that because there's no, like with that pause at the bottom, you've gotten rid of all the kinetic energy, you know, the momentum of the movement. You're there for a second and then it's like burst up, like explode up. So I really like a long eccentric and then a quick concentric. And I think that's a little different than, well, at least what I see in the gym, you know, when we, even the way we count reps, it's like 1, 2, I'm making a bicep curl for those of you that are listening, right? So we don't even think about the concentric. It's like that we only count on the concentric. Whereas if you start thinking about elongating and that's the count, you know, I said to you before, the Norwegian, you know, the 4x4s, like all good exercises are named after Central or Eastern European.
I know.
You know?
Yeah. They've been thinking about this for a really long time. Yeah.
Exactly. But they all think about the eccentric, like they count on the, like if you look at if you look at any of these sort of Eastern European, Asian, you know, teams, they're all looking at the eccentric, right? So I always say like my worst thing is like Bulgarian split squats again, Bulgaria, you know, but it's like the slower you come down, like it's going to hurt, but it hurts so good. Like that's what you're looking for. That's what you're trying to chase is that discomfort.
100%. Yeah. And I think like if you're going so fast, you're not really creating like, it's not an efficient adaptive, you're not creating like this adaptive response that's efficient, you know? And I think to your point, like leaning into that discomfort is important. Obviously you don't want to hurt yourself. Right. And that's where the form is just really important. Right. Like, and I think we're like, oh, just go out and lift stuff, you know, and yeah, okay. Yeah. Lift stuff. But when you're really trying to make gains in, you know, I think I don't want us to like, you know, just bypass like how important it is to make sure that you've got the right form, because you can really hurt yourself, right? But I think like you will reduce your likelihood of injury when you're going slow. So that's another, I think, real benefit of doing these movements in a very controlled, very slow manner with weight that you can handle, right? And then just progressively, you know, move your weights up as, you know, but maintaining that perfect form and technique. And to your point, like check the ego out the door, you know, really just you against you and just focus on that perfect form and you'll make gains a lot faster.
Yeah. And like choose your pain, like choose the pain of the squat or the pain of staying the same. Right? So
yeah.
Like,
I love
that's
that.
what I think about. It's like, you know, you're either going to stay the same, which is painful in and of itself, or you're going to have a really uncomfortable squat session, a really uncomfortable leg day or whatever. And then, you know, you're going to see the adaptations from there. That's the voice in my head when I'm squatting. Yeah. I'm like, which pain do you want, Steph?
Yeah. No, I think that's right. Yeah. So, you know, I think so as you move through all these cardiovascular parameters, you know, kind of out like that. And I think like when you're thinking about your week, it's like I like to outline like, all right, these are all the cardiovascular things that I'm going to do. And then, all right, I'm going to do, you know, shoulder, upper back on Monday, Tuesday. And then, you know, Wednesday, Thursday, I'm going to do legs and lower back. You know, Saturday, Sunday, I'm going to do some combination of chest. And, you know, a lot of I try to do, you know, like I'll do abs. Like I'm not like a lot of the exercises, like you're already getting your abs. You know, if you're doing good mornings, for example, like you're engaging your abs, your entire core, your squats.
You need core. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so there's a lot of exercise where you're already getting at your core, but I think I'll just put I think it's really important for if you want to create some definition, like use weights for abs. Like, I don't know why people don't use weights for abs, but that's just these last like few years, I've really started like leaning into that. And I've just seen like major, like really fun adaptations to my abs. So I'll make a case for using abs. Yeah. Or using weights for abs, but I don't think you need to do those every day. And I don't know that doing, you know, gazillion crunches is like worth your time. I'd say use weights for abs and you can get, I think, adaptations a lot faster, you know, with fewer reps.
So we talked about raw strength. What about explosive strength? Is that the concentric or do you have another framework for that?
Yeah. So, you know, and this is more of like really intense efforts that, you know, it's more of like a 30 seconds where you're kind of doing as many kettlebells as you can for 30 seconds or as many box jumps as you can for 30 seconds or, you know, split jumps or squat jumps, and maybe just with like a little bit of resistance. But the idea is that you're being explosive through the entire movement. And, I'll do these like, once a week where I'm really focused on like, jumping and landing. And I think this is too, it's really good for injury prevention too. Like I think oftentimes we go in, one plane, you want to try to go in lots of different planes. So even with the sprint interval training, like, maybe you do, instead of doing it just a flat out 200, like you're going to do an agility, for the same duration as you would like a 200, for example, or you do like a suicide, up 5, back 5, up 10, back 10 through 20 yards, something like that, where you're having to change direction and go from like high to low. But so same sort of concept, I think, with this explosive functional strength is you're really, you're kind of putting your body in positions where you're a little unstable and you're having to move a light load from that position of instability, right? And that really, I think the functional stuff really mimics the chaos of life, and I think the raw strength gives you that scaffolding that you need to really protect, your skeletal system, whereas functional strength really allows you to respond and adapt to life as it kind of comes at you, if that makes sense.
No, I really love that. And I've also kind of changed my viewpoint I'll say this has been like a slow evolution just from being in clinic and seeing, let's say, knee injuries, foot injuries, ankle injuries, where we were taught in school, like they have to, rest and they have to avoid the movement. And it's like, actually, you got to put the knee in positions of instability and train it there so that it gets stronger. To your point, is so that you can deal with the chaos of life. So you can pick up a grocery bag or a box or something really, it's funny. You went down the stairs a little bit weird, but the patellar tendon and like the positioning of the knee is okay so that you don't fall down the stairs, right? And so I used to, earlier in my, when I was in private practice, I would do the the RICE protocol, because that's what we were taught, like rest, ice, compression. Blah, blah. And now it's like, let's actually train you where you are most unstable. And let's get you, and this has actually come in handy. My children completely don't appreciate me, so I'm just going to appreciate myself as a soccer mom. But the foot injuries, the ankle injuries, the knee stuff, like they're always getting tackled and all that, slide tackled and all that stuff. But how can we train the ankle? How can we train the foot? How can we train the knee in areas of instability so that when it does happen on the pitch or just, in regular life, that it's not going to tear you apart. I think that's so, so, so important.
Yeah. I just learning how to jump and land and fall, like all of those things are just really important. So building that into, I think, your training and kind of simulating that is really critical.
I like to do them at the end of the workout. So I wonder, even as like a drop set. So instead of dropping the weight, like if, let's say I'm doing a step up, using legs again, then what I might do is so I'll take the barbell off and then I'll just like jump up, like I'll just like step up and it'll be like a jump. So I'm like doing a plyo, I guess it would be a plyo. And I do that until I can't anymore. And then I'll do, same thing on the other leg. I'll do the barbell lunge, let's say, step up onto the bench. And then it'll be like a, what's that exercise called? A step jump? I don't know what it is, but I'm lunging and I'm jumping at the top of the bench and then I'm coming back down.
Oh, yeah, I know what you mean. So
I don't know what the right word is. Somebody help me out.
So you're doing a split jump, jump
on the bench.
The bench. Okay.
Yeah. So I'll come up. So instead of having the barbell, take the barbell off, I'll rack it, and then I keep the bench there, and then so now it's just body weight, and now I'll come up in that lunge position, jump up, and then land with that one foot on the bench, and then come back down.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I don't know what that's called, but I know what you're talking about, though. But that's a good one.
I've made it up. I don't know. I'm sure people do it. I like to do them as finishers, like Metcons. Like I just like to, like my metabolic conditioning. So I've finished with the weight and now I'm just it's like my drop set, or I'm just going to finish the muscle off. If I feel like I have a little bit more in the tank, but I can't necessarily do it with the weight I've been doing, I'll rack the weight and then I'll just do body weight jumps until I can't.
Yeah, I love it. And it's just a great one to do as well. Like just the snacks throughout the day, like just squat jumps, where you're just like, you're squatting down and then you're exploding up, and you just do 10 of those, Another one are, the star jumps. I always hate those. And, mountain climbers too, like you just get on all fours and you just like, or 10 push-ups, like, I'm really big on these like movement snacks. I think that is such a great way for just busy folks to like, just get it in. But I think you
Get
need to
it in.
schedule it, and that's where, again, so you're thinking about, all right, I sit down, I'm like, oh, what does my week look like? What are my commitments? When do I have when do I have time? When do I not have time? So that really is how I think about when I schedule my workouts. And then I use heart rate variability, coefficient of variation to kind of look at, how I'm responding and adapting over the course of the week. So I don't worry so much about acute recovery during the week unless I'm really drained and really feeling, just crappy. Yeah, maybe I won't work out, but I'm not really looking at data day to day necessarily. I'm looking at just my adaptation over the course of the week and what my intent was physiologically, and did I meet that intent? So I use some objective data to kind of help me think that out as I'm planning the next week. But I really think about I really think about it more of all right, when do I actually have time to fit this in? And that's how I schedule, across these different physiological triggers on the cardiovascular side and the muscular side. And then I try to build in recovery just daily, right? So that's more of a, it's I'm not just doing recovery when I feel crappy, right? I'm just doing it as proactively as I can so I can sustain a level of functioning where I can train every day and I can kind of come to my training with capacity. So recovery, I think that's the big mistake that folks make, is they kind of wait to do the recovery stuff when they're feeling crappy. No. We need to stay hydrated. We need to, eat as, healthily as possible, as often as possible. We need to stabilize your sleep wake time. We need to spend enough time in bed. These are all recovery things, right? We need to, and then if we have access to cold and hot, these are other ways that we can really improve our capacity to train. And, because if we're improving our recovery, then we can show up tomorrow and train again, right? So a lot of these modalities, help us with that.
I'm so bullish on cold and heat therapy.
Yeah.
I love them.
Yeah.
I don't I know there's been some people that talk about cold as it's going to burn so much. It doesn't burn. I mean, it burns some calories, but it's not really where I really like cold water immersion in particular is the muscle recovery function.
Yeah.
And it's also just the waking you. I like to do it first thing in the morning. So it wakes me up.
Yeah.
I always try to, if I haven't gotten it in the morning and I've exercised, I always try to put a big chunk of time between the exercise and the cold. But speak briefly about your thinking around cold and heat therapy as proxies for recovery, for all the things, because that was the other topic that I know we're getting close to our time, but I wanted to make sure that we talk about that briefly.
Yeah, well, there's good evidence now that cold after exercise, helps reduce muscle damage. So, there's that, and I think and what's happening here is there's a reduction in inflammation, and as we know, inflammation can be good, but, if we want to show up tomorrow and train, we want to try to reduce some of that inflammation, that acute inflammation after exercise. There has been some evidence that in men, but not in women, which is really interesting. In men, cold water immersion after exercise can blunt muscle hypertrophy, whereas we don't see that same effect in women. But it will definitely help prevent the delayed onset muscle soreness. It helps prevent that in both men and women.
I wonder if it's the type 1 fibers.
Yeah, the mechanism.
I wonder if it's the type 1 fibers. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's probably right. I would need to reread that literature to look at the mechanism. But yeah. I thought that was pretty cool. But yeah, I think just the benefits, I think to go back to your earlier point about doing something hard, right? When you're in, really below 59 degrees is what we've seen in the literature, where we're going to see benefits of cold water immersion. But I think the bottom line is that we're intentionally submerging ourselves in the cold water. That's an important component. And, and it feels uncomfortably cold. That's when you're in cold enough water to get the effects, the beneficial effects. And I think, to your earlier point about doing something hard, it's super uncomfortable, but you do feel so darn good after. You feel like you can take on the world. You're I just did something really hard, and I know it's good for me. And, it's this concept of hormesis, right? We're reducing a stress at the right dose that has a health promoting effect to the system. And that's really what cold and, a sauna or kind of a heat therapy help induce. So, but I think the mental health benefits, I think it can't be underscored enough for both, I think, heat, hot, and cold. But I think particularly the literature around cold is really, more robust every day around just the mental health benefits of cold water immersion, because we are releasing, there's real hormonal, things happening, but the release of serotonin and dopamine and post cold water immersion is real and have, not just acute effects, but actually sustained effects, for hours after the cold water immersion session. And it doesn't need to be more than, it could be in a minute, 2 minutes to 3 minutes, depending on how adapted you are. But yeah, it doesn't have to be, this is a really quick, efficient way to, improve your mental health.
Love that. And heat? Do you practice heat therapy?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
I invested in an infrared sauna, which I guess a couple of years ago, and it's been just absolutely magical. I love it so much. And I think what's great with sauna, it just feels so darn good, right? It's relaxing. I stretch in there. I think just listen to my thoughts and, throw away the ones that are nonsense. And, I just have all sorts of little different routines that I do in the sauna. But yeah, there's well established effects on, increasing human growth hormone. I think it's by up to like 600% when we're, in the sauna for, 20 minutes a few times a week. So looking to, I think that the protocols are 174 degrees, I think for dry sauna, is that correct? And a little bit less for infrared. Infrared, I think, is up to anywhere from 140 to 160 maybe. And then, and just need to check that. And then dry sauna, I think, is 174 plus. And again, depending on how tolerant you are to heat, a little more, a little less. But the effects on human growth hormone are real and pretty well established. So that alone, I think, is worth it to try to get in the sauna a few times a week for 20 minutes or so.
And a lot of gym memberships, a lot of gyms have access to sauna now. I too just recently invested in an infrared sauna, and it's just a delight. It's like I have my little dry brush in there, and like
Me
brushing
too.
my skin.
Same.
My skin. It's just, I feel so good. And to your point, when I first got it, I couldn't actually stay in there longer than like 20, 30 minutes. I was like, okay, I feel like this is done.
Yeah.
Like my Aura ring was like, you're stressed. And now I can stay in there for about an hour, and I do the dry brushing. I have a podcast on, like you said, listening to my thoughts, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's lovely. And I use it actually in the evening about, I'll probably get in there about 7 or 8 o'clock, and then I'm out. Actually, probably closer to 7 to 8. And then I start my evening routine, hair and oils and all that stuff. So,
yeah. It's great right before bed.
Yeah.
It's kind of where I try to position it is before bed. So I'll do the sauna, same, like 20, 30 minutes. And I have like a big thing of water that I drink.
Great.
Yeah. With a little element in there. And then,
there's our shameless plug for Element Tea.
Oh, I have that same cup. It says stay cozy on the back, right?
It does, look, stay cozy.
I have that too. Oh, I know. I love that cup so much. I just recently lost the lid and I was like devastated. I needed to, But yeah, and then I, get in the shower and put all my creams and oils on and then I hit the nest. But I think that, it's basically all of the, blood is getting pushed to the extremities away from the core, which is kind of what you need to fall asleep, right? You need the core temperature to drop, and the heat actually helps the core temperature drop. So so it's a great pre-bed modality. It definitely makes me feel a little lethargic though. So it's not like I need to position it like before bed for the most part.
Yeah. There was I just did a solo episode on the show about sauna therapy. And there was also some interesting research on hypertrophy, on muscle hypertrophy through heat shock protein activation. So if you're someone if you've just worked out at the gym, jumping in the sauna right after is actually awesome, because now you're pairing the hypertrophy signal from the mechanical load that you've just lifted. And then also the heat stress is going to also drive hypertrophy, but it's also really great if you're injured. So if you're injured for whatever reason, you can't work out, this is a way for you to preserve your muscle tissue while you're kind of rehabbing and getting back, because you're also it's a hypertrophy signal. It's a muscle hypertrophy signal, which I thought was really cool. So I try to get in there I try to get in there 4 times a week. I've read all the finished data on, cardiovascular health and sudden cardiac death and all that. So it's like, I'm at it's like 4 to 5, sauning 4 to 5 times a week. You have like the 63%, I think, reduction in all-cause mortality.
So,
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm in there 4 times a week. It's probably one of the best, other than a really good mattress, it's probably one of the best things I've done for sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I absolutely, I love it so much.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I will say, like, the days where I don't work out, like, I'll do an extra long sauna session, like if
Yeah.
I'm just like, just feeling, I just don't feel like working out, which those days happen. Like, I'll just get in the sauna for 30 minutes and feel like I worked
Nice.
out.
Yeah. Well, you kind of did.
I kind of did, right? Like, it works your
you kinda
heart,
did.
and I
Yeah.
mean, for all the cardiovascular stuff that we're talking about. But it is actually cool, really. I have heard this, like, stacking it on top of cardiovascular session, like, you get like the double benefit of
Yeah.
that workout, which is really, really kind of cool.
So have we gone through all the things for Batwoman
We have
Fitness?
Batwoman
Okay. And
Fitness.
why did we name it Batwoman Fitness? I just love the name.
It's like when you watch like Batwoman, she can kind of just do everything, right? She can like chase the guy, like jump over the fence, like, catch him and then roll around on the ground and like get up and like, and then, she can sprint and she just can do all the things, and I think like from my standpoint, I'm really after health. I'm really after longevity. And I want to be able to maximize the interplay between my cardiovascular system and my nervous system. And for me, this is kind of the protocol that I've come to a strong conclusion that this is like kind of the path, and it's really understanding these physiological triggers that we outlined, the mitochondria, the lactic acid, the max oxygen utilization. Like, I think when you kind of understand that, you're like, okay, I need to tap into this in a way that's a little strategic, right? So I can make sure that I'm really creating this holistic framework for like my adaptation, right? And I think that this kind of gets at all of that.
Love that. I hope you're going to write a book about this.
I am.
You are. Okay,
I am.
you have to.
Yeah, and this is just a part of it. But yeah, my Batwoman protocols will be in there for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's give people where they can find you, where they can interact with you. They definitely need to follow you online. I think we'll make sure that we put your Instagram handle, but where can people find you if they want to find out more about you and Batwoman and all the other fun things that you engage in?
Yes. So I think Instagram, and let me just see what my handle is real quick. I should probably know that.
It's Kristen Homes and then some numbers.
Yes, Kristen _Homes 2126. And then LinkedIn, Kristen Homes, not the CNN correspondent. I'm the other Kristen Homes. I'm like, yeah.
I love that. Yeah. And you're still working with Whoop, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
Still,
yep. So I'm the global head of human performance, principal scientist there. So just, really very committed to all the research. We're actually writing up a manuscript right now and some recent findings, which we're really excited about, that involve time restricted eating and morning sunlight viewing and their impact on all measures of cardiovascular function. So it's like kind of an epic finding. And just that those two behaviors that are democratically available, have such a profound influence on these really important markers of health was cool. So yeah, excited to get that out in the world.
Awesome. It's always time well invested when I get to spend time with you, Kristin. Thank you for coming back for part 2. And I look forward to seeing you in person very soon.
Same. Thank you so much. Such an honor.